Welcome to episode 260 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. It was an entertaining game between the Bruins and Penguins. They always seem to have those high-scoring games, Bridget and Scott, but it's been a lot of hockey over the last week or so. Let's jump into our opening shifts between the Penguins, Bruins, and just the week prior, and looking forward.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling Bridget in the press box as the Bruins were coming back and eventually tied it after being down 5-2. The last time the Bruins had a 3-goal comeback and won was last year in November in that crazy game in Pittsburgh. And it was the same thing. They were down 5-2 and ended up winning 6-5. Of course, this one they ended up losing 6-5. But my opening shift is related to that game Thursday, and it's just the disappointment of the Bruins defense falling apart after really seeming to have turned a corner during the 4-game winning streak. They had allowed just 7 goals total during that 4-game winning streak, which, was a significant improvement over the way they were playing before Christmas break when they lost 4 in a row. And then they give up 4 in the first period alone on Thursday, another one early in the second. And they're down 5-2, and they're mistakes that the Bruins don't make when they're playing their best, but have cropped up a few times now. And it's losing races and battles at the net front. A couple of those goals were situations where Pittsburgh ended up with a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-2 down low and just had the Bruins outnumbered at their own net front. Montgomery talked about that after the game. A couple careless turnovers that led to odd man rushes. Even late in the game, it's, they turn over and there's an odd man rush going the other way that leads to a McAvoy hooking penalty that then sets up the Sidney Crosby power play goal for the winner. So really sloppy effort. I think, the Bruins sort of spun as a positive after, saying like, hey, at least, we had the resiliency to fight back and we never gave up. And that is encouraging, but what led to them being in that hole in the first place was just a disappointing step back after, a much better stretch from them before that.
Yeah, and Charlie Coyle, though, actually, when I talked to Charlie, he wasn't giving them any excuses, but we can get into that after, because my opening shift is not really about Thursday's game, but it's about what we might see Saturday and what's coming down the pipeline with Poitras back, Canada out of the World Juniors early, and Poitras back with the team. So he didn't play Thursday, even though he was in town. Chances are he plays Saturday, or at least gets his first game when they head out on their road trip. I'm hoping for Saturday, and my main take is that we've gotten hints that he's gonna come back and play wing instead of center. And I personally, when he left, thought it was a bad idea. I've the entire time been maybe in the minority on this, that it wasn't the right move. And I felt like he was going to lose his spot. And if he goes to the wing, then Morgan Geekie has done a great job. But you know what? They've also moved Zacha to the wing. They've completely shuffled things around. And in the time that he was away, he may have lost the job that he wanted, which would have been playing center on the second or the third line. So I'm interested to see what happens Saturday. And I don't know. I have a bad feeling about what might come if he doesn't play well in the first 2 or 3 games back.
Yeah, and everybody talks about his maturity as a player, and we'll see if that comes to fruition. I mean, I think there's a lot to be. There's a lot of people who are arguing whether or not World Juniors was a good thing for Poitras or not. End of the day, we won't really know until we see him come back. I mean, if he comes back, and I don't think we'll ever know. If he comes back and plays lights out, I don't think we can say for sure it's because he went to World Juniors and came back motivated. And if he comes back and plays lethargic, I don't think we can necessarily say it's because he went to World Juniors. So it's kind of a silly conversation, I think, or debate. I think the only thing that matters is what you're saying, Bridget, which is, how he does in general coming back and where that is. So for me, I'm also going to kind of look big picture here. We're approaching the All-Star break, and the Bruins, as recent as I think maybe yesterday, were first in the NHL. With a loss, they've slid down to fourth in the NHL. The top 5 teams in the league are all within 5-6 teams are all within 3 points of each other. So it's going to be one of those types of leapfrogging things for a while here. So in the standings, they're great. They are tied for 4th in the league in goals against as a team. They are tied for 12th in the league, goals for. Plus minus is probably they're probably somewhere in the top 10 as well. So the team is like they are objectively a very good hockey team. There is no question about it. For me, watching this team so intimately and knowing just like where they can be vulnerable and where they need to improve going forward, I look at a few different areas, and I think the game against the Penguins kind of put a magnifying glass on a few of them. Number one, while they are 4th in the league, tied for 4th in goals against, I still think that their defense. I just muted myself. I think their defense needs to be. They need to be tougher to play against, certainly in front of the net. And I look at that game against the Penguins, and not once but twice, Matt Grzelcyk just gets, out muscled or out positioned, however you want to, phrase it, in front of the net, leads to a goal. Scott mentioned the defense against the Penguins, like Lindholm, just on that third Penguins goal, just like, what are you doing? Just mental. It's a combination of mental errors and a lack of, I think, physicality. And I think I look at Lindholm and I look at McAvoy and Grzelcyk as players that like we expect like so much better, certainly from Lindholm and McAvoy. And they have to be not just the best defenseman for the Bruins, but top defensemen in the NHL if they want this team to go where they want to go. And I think they need to be better. We all know the Bruins probably they're missing a top 6 forward, probably. Could that be Poitras? Maybe. But I also think there's an identity issue on the Bruins' 4th line. I don't think this team can go anywhere when your 4th line literally is not producing any offense and is not a stalwart defensive unit and they're not creating chaos. Steen and Lauko and Beecher or whomever is not really getting it done. And in recent games with Merkulov, like Montgomery's not even using his 4th line. So I see that as a problem long term. You cannot go through 2 months of potential playoff hockey without a 4th line identity. So I look at the 4th line, I look at the defense, it needs to be tougher and maybe an additional forward. But as we finish the first half of the season, that's kind of where my mind is at with this team.
I can't get by the fact that you just said stalwart, and I hate that word. That is a gross word.
Did I even say it right? Is it stalwart?
Yeah, stalwart. I didn't know that was a word Bridget hated. I'm gonna have to start using it more.
It has the word wart in it. Come on, guys. It's not a great word.
I don't even know if I used it properly, but hey,
you'll never catch me on the broadcast saying stalwart.
I fake it till I make it. If somebody says something, then maybe I'll admit I don't know what I'm talking about. But anywho, yeah, so that's my opening shift. A little bit long-winded, but
which Bruins the most stalwart-esque? I mean, defensively, maybe Brendan Carlo.
Oh yeah, maybe Carlo.
He's a defensive stalwart.
Oh God, I shouldn't have said anything.
Should be. But yeah, look, I'm trying to be mindful with this opening shift. Like the reason I said what I said in the beginning, like I recognize where they are in the standings and where they are, team metrics. Like they are objectively a good team, but I just think that there are certain areas that they have to improve if they want to, win a championship, right? That's what their goal is.
Yeah, well, so I'll tie 2 of you guys' opening shifts together a little bit with, Poitras coming back. One thing that can do is lengthen the Bruins lineup. Where exactly he slots in is one conversation. How other pieces move around is another part of this. And part of that is that someone who has actually been producing some offense might drop down to that 4th line, whether that's Danton Heinen, who we saw slide down there recently when Georgi Merkulov first came up, or maybe even Trent Frederick, especially if they want to keep Frederick at center. Like, I don't think Johnny Beach has done a bad job at all as 4th line center, but could he bump over to the wing to make room for Frederick to center that line? Like, it's an option. I think there's going to be a process of the Bruins working this out and probably trying a few different things, which could include Poitras on the wing. But Yeah, Brian, you're right. Like they do have to find a way to get some offense from the fourth line. It doesn't have to, no one expects it to be a go-to offensive line every night, but it can't just be zeros night after night after night for like literally a month on end. When I wrote about the fourth line a little bit, I think right before Christmas. And at that point, Lauko, Beecher, and Steen had combined for 1 point in the month of December in like over 3 weeks. Um, Jake, like I think when it was Lauko, Beecher, Steen, at least you could see an identity there of like speed, forechecking, some physicality, and they weren't giving up a lot defensively. Like they were doing the job of not allowing much, but they just weren't producing anything offensively. Like Lauko has played 27 games this year, still has not scored a goal, 3 points. Oscar Steen has 1 point in 22 games. Beecher, I didn't look up how long this has gone back, but I know he has 6 points on the season, but a very quiet stretch recently. I mean, 1 point for him since November 30th. So yeah, like there's got to be something. You can't have that. You can't have guys going a month without getting a single point.
Yeah, and Lauko was scratched yesterday. I saw him up on the ninth floor. And to go back to like kind of combining me and Brian's first shifts, if Poitras comes back and you slot him on the third line back at center, that would bring you back to a line you saw before, which would be JVR, Poitras, Frederick, and that would bump Heinen back to the fourth line. I don't want to see Frederick drop back to the fourth line. I know you're like the idea being like maybe you get scoring from every single line now at that point. But I just feel like Frederick has done so much, and he's somebody that we've seen do really well over the past few weeks. Like it feels like a demotion for him to go down to the fourth line. I know that in the past, spreading out your talent, like back when Taylor Hall was on the team and they had him on the third line, like sometimes you move guys lower in the lineup than really they should be to try to spark the scoring and, on all four lines. But Frederick has just been playing so well that I don't want to see him get pushed maybe to a line that slows down his progress and slows down his production. And I don't like the idea of putting Poitras at wing. We didn't see him do that. And I don't know if you guys remember, this is a contradictory thing to what management had said before. So coming out of training camp, people asked Bruins management, would he ever play wing? And they were like, we don't really want to play him there. He's a center. We want to keep him there at his natural position. And then when he went to World Juniors, they said when he comes back, he still has his job and he doesn't have to worry about losing his job. And then he obviously still coming back to the Bruins, but he did kind of lose his job. And if he moves to the wing.
To be fair, they said specifically he's coming back to the team. They actually said he'll have to earn his spot. Like
that is true. They did say that, but then that means he lost it, like because he left. To me that there's just something that's contradictory about the statements that have been said about him this year. And that makes me very weary that if he doesn't come back and have a good first week or two, maybe he does go back to juniors. Maybe they send him. I don't like the idea at all. I think he should have been in Boston this whole time. And I know he has to earn it. Everybody does. But I felt like he's maybe just not been told by management exactly the truth and what they're planning to do with him.
Yeah, and so I want to piggyback off that, Bridget, but just to summarize some of the numbers that Scott was giving on the fourth line. So Steen, Lauko, and Beecher combined 10 points in a combined 82 games played so far this year, and a collective minus 13. I know plus minus is kind of a subjective number based on how people think it's important or not, but so when you have 10 combined points in 82 games, minus 13 collectively, and outside of a couple of Lauko fights, like there's not a whole lot doing right when they're out there. It's a tough look, and obviously like Milan Lucic was somebody they wanted on that fourth line to provide that experience and leadership and physicality. And I think if it wasn't for his off ice issues, I think the fourth line might have a little bit something going. But he's not here, and this is what the reality is. So they got to figure that out. I don't see why. I don't know why like somebody like maybe Mark McLaughlin, who we know isn't having a great year in Providence necessarily, or somebody like that in Providence. I don't know why Oscar Steen and is getting that, or like I don't know. I just think there's fourth line type players are more abundant in the AHL than say like a Georgi Merkulov who's you're trying to put into a top 6 role one day. Like I think you can try to give guys opportunity if these guys aren't doing the job. Maybe find a way. And I know I just kind of opened up a different discussion, and I want to jump back to Bridget's point. So I don't know if you had anything on that, or else I'll just go.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd just say like Mark McLaughlin's going to start scoring in Providence before I think Boston gives him any look, because if we're talking about like the fourth line not scoring, I haven't looked recently, but I know McLaughlin was at like 5 points in 30 games or something down there. So,
but he did
that
look
wouldn't
good.
really.
Like sometimes maybe I hate to say this, and it's not really fair because what you're saying is absolutely true. But maybe with certain players, like environment makes a difference for them. I don't know. All I know is that when he was in Boston for that short stint, he seemed to impress all of us on this podcast.
Yeah, for sure, and he was close to making the team out of camp last year. But I think there's stuff he has to get right in Providence before he's ready to come back. I start with, and I guess to circle back to Bridges' point, like I don't think Poitras in danger of getting sent to juniors, because I think they need him right now because they need to lengthen the lineup, like I said, and that's going to mean dropping someone down to the fourth line. And we know, earlier in the year when they were like pretty close, when they were at full strength or pretty close to it, it was Morgan Geekie who got dropped down to the fourth line. I don't think that's happening now, but sure, like start with Heinen and see if a Heinen, Beecher, and either Lauko or Steen have those guys fight for playing time. Like, does that at least start to give you something offensively? Because Danton Heinen isn't lighting the world on fire, but he's been a fairly consistent 5-on-5 contributor. So can he bring that to that line and help kind of lift those guys up? Like, I'll start there, and I know that that gives that fourth line a different look, and it's not, maybe as fast and physical as you might want, but you're gonna have to try something different. Like you said, like if you want to find some offense, you got to be able to change it up a little. And Heinen's still a good defensive player. Tough turnover last night aside, but like I think you can still trust him for those roles too, if that's how you want to continue to use your fourth line.
Yeah, and I certainly don't think Georgi Merkulov's still Poitras' job in the eyes of anyone. So it's unfortunate for Merkulov, because we were thinking maybe he would get a little bit more ice time and we'd have more of a way to gauge his pro prospects. But there really wasn't a lot that we could go off of. He didn't get a lot of time, and he didn't get put in situations where we could have seen him use his skill set very much. So kind of quiet. I swear I noticed him on the ice. I know he was on there more, but he wasn't noticeable. Like maybe noticed him on the ice like twice yesterday. Because
he only played like 6 minutes.
Yeah.
So. What do you guys, while we're here, what do you guys, because I see this a lot on Twitter especially, but the idea that like they didn't give him a chance, or they should have played him higher in the lineup or put him with more skilled players. I have my own opinion of this, but I'm curious what you guys think.
I don't think there was a spot for him higher in the lineup.
That's what I think. Yeah.
I don't think that it would have made sense to. I mean, I understand, like, okay, if this was a team that wasn't going to make the playoffs, go for it. If this was training camp, go for it. But it's not. And we obviously, just kind of as fans, and we have this curiosity about what he might be like. So like just fans of hockey in general, we want to see, all right, we know he has this interesting creative skill set that we want to see at some point, but I just don't think that it was I mean, it was the right time to call him up, but it wasn't the right time to do anything drastic and move him higher in the lineup. And sometimes that's what happens to prospects. We saw this happen to like Jack Stanika a bunch of times where he comes in on the fourth line, barely plays. We know he's not really the character of a fourth line player. So yeah, I guess probably you and I agree, Scott, that it just wasn't the right time to do that.
Well, yeah, okay. So there's a few different ways you can go about it. Like I understand why he wasn't put higher in the lineup. I understand why, Montgomery felt the need to shorten the bench at times. I understand all that. But for me, I still have this itch on my back that I haven't scratched with Merkulov. Like, I feel like we all want him to come to Boston to see what he could do in a certain situation, to learn about him. And I feel after this stint with him, and I'm not just talking the Pittsburgh game, I'm talking, the prior 4 or 5, whatever it's been. What's gonna happen is they're gonna send him back down to Providence, and I'm gonna be like, we didn't learn anything because you didn't put him in a situation where he gave us a chance to learn about him. And I feel like it was a missed opportunity just to learn about the players as an asset and what he could do. So like, could you have found a period, maybe a game to stick him with, one of the top 2 lines for the whole game as the center, just to see what it looked like. And I just feel like he's going to go back down to Providence, and everybody has this like sour taste in their mouth / no taste in their mouth because we just didn't really see anything because they put him in a limited third line role and then shorten the bench in the third periods. And you kind of like the point of the call up was to see what he could do or gauge where he could be in the future. And we didn't get that. So in that sense, I kind of view it as a failure on the organization's part.
Yeah, I think the one thing they could have done more, and again, I guess we're talking like assuming he's getting sent back once they activate Poitras. Bridget is like,
what the hell?
What the hell? some House of Mirrors or something.
Wait a minute, let me try to fix this, guys. Okay. Keep talking. Let me just
actually a twin. Oh, she's
all right. So on Merkulov, like the one thing I would have liked to have seen more is him centering the third line between Van Riemsdyk and Frederick, because I thought that looked pretty good when he started there, and there was some potential. And then it got into one of those situations where it was like, well, Montgomery wasn't using him in the third period because it was a close game. He didn't really trust him yet. And then he sort of just stuck with that Van Riemsdyk, Frederick, Heinen combo. And I would have liked to have seen a little more of that, because I also think that would have given you a longer look at Heinen on the fourth line and what that does. So again, I think you're going to get that anyways now with Poitras back, but that is one situation where like Merkulov seemed to be a bit of a fit, and showed at least some potential, helping that line create some chances. And the last like 2-3 games, especially, just hasn't been there. He's been on the fourth line.
Well, like everybody was calling for it, right? The fan base was salivating for a chance to see him. You guys wanted to see it. I'll ask you guys, like how do you do you feel like you're satisfied, and like did you, not so much in his play, but do you feel like you got enough of an opportunity to see him? And I think you just kind of answered a little bit, Scott, but I don't. Like everybody wanted it, and it was kind of like a tease,
No, I don't feel like sorry, Bridge, I jumped in because I didn't know if you were 100% ready to go.
I'm back. Let me talk, okay?
Well, let me just finish my point quick. Like, no, I don't really feel like I saw enough of him. But I didn't think this was going to be a long-term call-up anyways. Had he had like a great stretch here and forced their hand, that would have been great. I really think this call-up, as much as anything, was about rewarding Merkulov for the way he was playing in Providence. Even more so than like, let's see if he can play in our top 6 or even our top 9. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think it was more player management of like, hey, this kid's earned it. Let's bring him up, give him a chance, come up with the bullet list of here's the things to work on when you go back down. So you're in an even better position next time. So I feel like in that sense, mission accomplished. Like, you gave the kid a taste. You let him know, like, hey, we see what you're doing down there. But yeah, sure. Like, I would have liked to have seen, like I said, at least on that third line. I'm with Bridget. Like, I don't think there was really an opening in the top 6, and I'm fine with not trying to force one. But sure, you could have given him more minutes somewhere.
Yeah, you could have definitely given him more minutes, but we've noticed this is a huge difference from last year to this year, shortening the bench much more often. Anyway, did you guys want to go into the Poitras thing a little bit? Because obviously it would have been, this discussion about Merkulov would have been way more front of mind if Poitras, wasn't in the picture. But now that he comes back, it affects Merkulov. Obviously, we think he's going to be sent down here soon. And Poitras come back into the lineup.
Well, I will say, as somebody who was anti sending Poitras to World Juniors, the one thing I can definitely say for sure it benefited was Morgan Geekie kind of getting an opportunity to move up in the lineup and find his stride. And he's become a consistent scorer for the Bruins, I would say, in the last 3 weeks or so. I'd have to look at I think he has 17 points in the season. I'd have to double check, but I feel like a lot of them have probably come in the last maybe 25 games, 30 games. So that's a positive sign for the Bruins. Now, is that primarily because he's been with Pastrnak and Zacha? I would actually say a little bit, but not a ton. Like, I think he's kind of just been good all around. So the question for him is, like, okay, if you do send him down the lineup because you're stretching the lineup, as Scott said, like, can he continue to be that player for you? If he can, then that's been a good development. I just feel like a little bit more space in the lineup has allowed Geekie to find his rhythm a little bit, and I think that's a positive.
Well, and if you do decide to move him down the lineup, then that means you're probably keeping him at center, right? You guys agree that they're probably keeping him at center even if they move him off of that line, or do you think they'll put him back to the wing? Because then that's what affects Poitras. Like, if he moves back, if he keeps his center role, moves back to the third line center, you move Zacha back over from wing, then that pushes Poitras to the wing.
I think Geekie's staying at center for now. To me, the discussion around, like, whether he moves back to wing or moves down the lineup almost has more to do with whether you keep Pavel Zacha on the wing or feel the need to move him back to center. And we were just talking about this a little bit off air, so I'll bring it on. Zacha has 1 point in his last 7 games, and I don't necessarily think that he's been playing poorly, and that line has actually looked pretty good for the most part. We've talked about Geekie looking good there. Pastrnak has 8 points in the last 4 games. He's just been his usual dominant self, and, like, Zacha is playing a role in that. He's part of that line's success. It's not, you don't have a line play well if one guy is completely invisible, but you also would like to see him putting up some points himself. So I think they're going to roll with it as is for now, but I do wonder if something changes at some point where they decide, hey, maybe Zacha's just not as involved as we'd like to see him be when he's on the wing. I think he's still trying to maybe figure that out. So to me, Geekie stays there. Poitras probably goes back to third line center. I think you can slide Frederick back over to the wing on that line. But I guess if they did decide to keep Frederick at center, then you explore the possibility of Poitras playing wing. And one thing I meant to note earlier is Poitras talked on Thursday to the media. He was back in the building on Thursday. Remains to be seen if he'll play Saturday. The Bruins are off Friday, so no practice to gauge line combos or anything. But Poitras actually said he had played winning in the past. He didn't specify when, so, like, for all we know, that could be when he was 9 years old. But it was because, Bridget, you're right. Like, during the preseason, pretty sure it was Sweeney who said, like, he hasn't played much center, and they tried him for a game there in like the rookie challenge out
No, he hasn't played
out
much
in
wing.
Buffalo. Sorry.
He hasn't played much wing. Is that what you meant to say?
Yeah, did I say center?
Yeah, yeah.
He's played a little bit of center, I think. But yeah, no, yeah. Sweeney said he hadn't played much wing, so Poitras said he's at least played it a little bit. So I guess it's not a totally foreign concept. Emily Kaplan on the ESPN broadcast Thursday night kind of hinted at that. Said like, don't be surprised if they try Poitras on the wing, and we know, she has great sources like within teams and talks to coaches and players before any ESPN games. So I'm sure that was coming from an educated point of view and was something she's heard and wasn't just guessing at. So it does seem like it's something that they might explore. And I don't have any problem with exploring it. Like it's fine to try it and see how it looks.
I have, but so what you first said before your last point there was that you would keep that Zacha, Geekie, Pastrnak line together. And I would too. I think that it's kind of gone maybe under the radar that Geekie and Pastrnak have created a lot of chemistry over the past few games. Like that pass that Pasta hit him on the back door, like Geekie's going to the right places on the ice and Pastrnak sees the ice well and he can make those kinds of passes. And it's led to both of their points going up. And like we said, Pasternak's a lot of times he gets taken away from the shot, but he finds the pass, and Geekie's been the beneficiary of a few of them. And I think that they kind of know where each other is on the ice now, and the chemistry formed pretty quickly. And I can't say that I want to see them get split up at this point. And if that's the case, then I don't know why you wouldn't just move Frederick to wing and put Poitras back at center. I feel like maybe we're splitting hairs at this point, but I just don't really see why you would need to keep Frederick at center. I know he hasn't done a bad job, but you also, he's a good winger too. So I just feel like that's a safer bet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of torn because on the one hand, I see a perfect world where like you could have Geekie with like Frederick and Van Riemsdyk and have a very heavy, like formidable third line that can, wear teams down and possess the puck and create offense. And then that opens up that opportunity for somebody in the top six, and whether that's Poitras or somebody external that comes in at the deadline to kind of, play with Pastrnak and Zacha if those two are still together. But I also agree with what you guys are saying right now. I wouldn't move Geekie off that line right now. First of all, I think he's played really well, and I think that his size has created space for Pastrnak out there. Like I think it's, if Poitras was with Zacha and Pastrnak, that line gets a lot smaller. When Geekie's there, all of a sudden there's more puck protection. I think with Geekie, he's winning more one-on-one battles. So yeah, I see what you guys are seeing. I don't know.
And Geekie's good net front. Like Geekie can be good net front, whereas Poitras, he doesn't go to that area of the ice very often. He's a completely different style of center. Like even Zacha doesn't go to the net that often, and definitely not as well as Geekie. When he gets down there, he's very effective, standing, side of the crease, top of the crease, taking away goalie's eyes, rebounds, like crashing the net. He brings that element to that line, which we've talked about before, like who could go with Pasta that could kind of cause that havoc in front of the net that might help relieve some of the stresses on Pastrnak. So you have that in Geekie, and he's been a decent center as well, like taking faceoffs and doing defensively as a center. So it's not time to break them up, in my opinion. No,
but I do think Zacha has to get going though.
Yeah. By the way, completely random aside, but Geekie tried that the move he makes on zone entries where he just tries to lift the defenseman's stick like as he's closing in on him. he's tried that a few times. Like I think we all noticed it because it led to a goal once, but I've noticed him do it a few more times since, and I just love that. Like I'm like, I wish I had that when I was growing up because I did not have this skill to take guys one-on-ones. So I should have just been, flinging defenders sticks all over the place. But
yeah, he just leaves the puck. Like he leaves the puck in a place that only he can reach it, and then he lifts the stick and then he grabs the puck again and goes around.
Yeah.
I've seen him do that a few times too. And maybe people will catch on eventually that that's his thing, but it seems to be effective for him right now.
So I'll present the case, shifting back to like Poitras, Frederick, that dynamic. I'll present the case for Frederick center, Poitras wing, and that would be that Montgomery has noted multiple times how demanding the Bruins system is on centers and how much skating it requires, how much movement around the defensive zone it requires, because the center is, in the Bruins zone defense, the center is the one really connecting everything and helping everywhere. Frederick, I think, just because he's been in the system longer, has more of a grasp of that defensive work. And so if he's a center, he handles that. Maybe that makes things less demanding on Poitras being on the wing, especially defensively. So that would be the argument for it. That's it. Like Bridget, I still lean towards your side of I would rather probably just play Poitras at center because that is his natural position. It's where you hope he's going to be long term. So I would just let him continue to have, whatever growing pains might go along with it. But that would be the case for making that switch.
Yeah, in terms of, keeping him at center versus moving him to wing for Poitras, it feels like almost like I think you'd be setting him up for not failure, but, he's set up more for success if you put him back where he's used to playing. If you move him to the wing and then he doesn't have success, then you almost feel like the next step is what? Like,
well, the next step's moving back to center.
Moving back to, okay, well, what if the next step was, Frederick's playing great at center? We don't need Poitras anymore. Like, he can't help at wing. He can't help at center. That's just the slippery slope that I see. I just don't really know what the full season plan is at this point. It seemed like it was pretty clear. And then all of a sudden, right before juniors, we kind of started to be like, okay, well, he's getting, he's not playing in the fourth period. They're taking him out of games. And now it's like they're moving him to wing. And our thoughts on what his role would be this season has really started to change pretty drastically over the last month.
I don't think it has for me, honestly. Like I think some experimentation is fine and almost even necessary. But I mean, in my mind, like I still see him by the end of the year being your number 3 center, which is where he's been for the most part. But and we see everyone else move around the lineup so much that I guess, like, to me, if you want to experiment with him on wing to see what it looks like, I wouldn't interpret that as being like, well, if that doesn't click, then maybe he goes back to juniors. Like, I don't know. I just think it's something you can try for a few games and see how it goes.
I don't think he should at any point in time to get sent back to juniors because this lineup needs the depth. Like they lose depth if they lose him. I just, for some reason, I'm skeptical. I don't know why. I just have a different instinct that, like, what you're saying, Scott, is what they should do. I'm just not sure that's what they will do, is I guess what I'm saying. Maybe I'm predicting it wrong incorrectly, but something is just, you ever just get that? No, anyone ever just get that sense like something's not right?
Bruins all the time, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Bridget always being the pessimist in this group.
No, I'm not. I'm just, maybe I'm a psychic. I don't know.
Skies are blue today. Scott and I are talking about blue skies. We're just talking about the nor'easter coming tomorrow.
Yeah, well, that's true. That is also coming. So
I think, all joking aside, I
have to go to the grocery store today, guys, and I am not looking forward to that. Very poor planning by me to not get there earlier in the week.
Market Basket, Chelmsford.
Market Basket Lowell.
Oh, right. I always get confused on where the line is over there on that side of the highway.
I have two of them within like a half mile of me. There's one on one side of the Rourke Bridge and one directly on the other side. Like, but they're just the bookends of the bridge.
Are you going to the one next that has the Papagenos in the plaza?
No. This one has a Marshalls next to it.
Oh.
And it's right next to the bowling alley. It's right next to the bowling alley.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to need to get my Lowell geography better. I was going to say,
people are going to start stalking me now outside this Market Basket.
Well, now I'm going to be in Lowell a bunch too, so I'm going to have to figure out the Lowell landmarks.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to be calling the PWHL Boston games, which I wanted to get to at the end of the podcast. But just to put your mind at ease, Bridget, I would be very surprised if the Bruins sent it back down to juniors because, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, like they need the depth. I mean, you have an injury to a top 6 caliber forward, like you need to fill that internally. And I mean, Poitras I just don't see it happening. I don't. I do want to shift gears a little bit, if you guys don't mind, to the defense because it was abysmal on Thursday night against the Penguins. But again, the team as a team, the Bruins they're a top 5 defensive team in the NHL goals against wise. But visually, there's something off with Lindholm. Grizzlick's been struggling all year. McAvoy's not been near the Norris caliber defenseman that he should be on a night-to-night basis. Grizzlick is going to get outmuscled all the time on the penalty kill. There's no doubt about it. I don't want to. He shouldn't be on the PK. But last night against the Penguins, got outmuscled twice, out position. Not a good showing for him. Not a great year for him. Lindholm, not good. How do you guys feel about this defense? Not so much right now on January 5th, but forward looking, like what needs to change with these guys? Is it personnel? Is it a mindset? Is it nothing?
Well, I mean, one thing you realize like how important this is going to sound obvious, but like how important the team game is to how good or bad their defensemen look. Because during that winning streak, they're playing much better team hockey. They have more possession. And lo and behold, you see the defenseman getting more involved. Lindholm has a few points during that stretch. McAvoy has a 3-assist game. Like, all of a sudden, it's like, wow, where has this been? And it's like, well, you haven't had the offensive zone possession to get these guys involved. So I think it feels like a defense core that you don't have the sort of dynamic offensive guys who can really like truly create from the back, like a Quinn Hughes or Cale Makar or Erik Karlsson. Like, you don't have any of those. But you do have guys who, if you're going to possess the puck and set up in the offensive zone, will get involved and can make some good plays. But then, like, when you're not doing that and when you're spending more time defending, all of a sudden that's when you get these stretches of like, hey, Lindholm's gone a week without a point, or McAvoy has 2 points in the last 5 games. Like, then all of a sudden they're not getting as involved because they're not going to single-handedly drive it. So it's got to be like all 5 guys together. So I guess it was a long way of me saying like a game like Thursday, I don't put it all in the defenseman because I think the forwards shoulder plenty of blame with, I mentioned like Heinen having a sloppy pass that led to a turnover. I think Trent Frederick got caught high in the zone at one point, which led to a 3-on-2 down low. Like, it's a team thing. And unfortunately for the defenseman, you end up noticing their mistakes last before the puck goes in the net. So I do agree. Like, Grizzly, I've been on that all year. I don't think he looks like the same player. Obviously, you want more from McAvoy and Lindholm. I think McAvoy's had good stretches, but is not playing at like the Norris caliber level that you're used to seeing. But yeah, you notice it's so much more when the team just breaks down. And as far as like what needs to change, we've said all along, like they need to play tougher. And like that doesn't have to be knocking guys over with 10 hits a game, but being harder to beat at the net front, winning more battles, moving guys out, tying up sticks. Like, again, the Penguins scoring multiple goals on deflections, rebounds, just traffic in general. A couple end up going in off Bruins, but that's because there's traffic there in the first place. So, like finding a way to clear those guys out and giving your goalie, a clear line of sight.
Do you guys think they're missing? And Bridge, I'll throw it to you first. But do you guys think that they're missing a, yeah?
I was actually about to say what they were missing before you even throw it.
See,
so
and
this entire
Sedin twins out here. We're like the Sedin twins.
Mm-hmm.
Chemistry.
Yes. I was thinking this entire conversation. You want to know what they're missing? They're missing a Dmitry Orlov. Like that. Can you imagine what the defense would look like this year if they had found a way to keep Dmitry Orlov?
See, I was gonna go the exact opposite. This is this is a good conversation to have. It really is. See, I think they have like, okay, so Orlov might drive offense a little bit more than maybe some of their, maybe McAvoy for maybe.
Well, he more than Grzelcyk.
Sure, but see, but to Scott's point, like they have guys that can transition the puck. Where I think that they need to improve a little bit on the back end is, we talked I think it was last year, the year before, but that guy Gavrikov, that he was with the Blue Jackets and he ended up going to the Kings. Like I feel, and this is what Derek Forbort's supposed to be, but I'm talking somebody who plays Derek Forbort's role, but better. Similar to like when you had Adam McQuaid, like just maybe somebody for a third pair that just like he's not gonna get up muscled and he's gonna lift those sticks, like he's gonna be tough in front of his net. Like think about
Come on, Dmitry Orlov though. Like he was great offensively. He was tough. You did not want to mess with that guy. He was good on the penalty kill. Like I don't like if they could have found a way to keep him.
They lost. He was rough defensively in the playoffs.
They lost in the first round last year, and he was a part of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm going to name a few names, and it's not that these guys are available or anything. I'm just saying these type of players, and they're just like, what they need somebody like Joel Edmondson was for like the Blues or somebody. It's just or the Pedersen guy last night for Pittsburgh. Or like a Zadorov or Eric Branson, just somebody who's a big body that's a prick to play against, and you can get him for cheap at the deadline. Those guys aren't those options because of their contracts, but I just feel like they're missing something like that because they do have the high-end talent on the back end, I think.
Yeah, the problem is like finding that. You mentioned like Forbort's role, but better, and ideally like a little meaner than Forbort. The problem is like there really aren't as many of those guys as you would think. Like I know everyone has this idea of like, oh yeah, go find a mean defenseman, and then like people name like Luke Shen or something. It's like, well, if Luke Shen's playing more than like 13, 14 minutes a game, you're in trouble. So finding Zadorov's a good one. Like that's someone who's available, who I think some people are overrating as like a true top four defenseman, but at the very least, you'd be very comfortable with him on your third pair. Obviously he already got moved, and the Bruins just simply weren't yet in a cap situation where that was possible. Like for them, it's going to have to be something closer to the deadline, I think. But yeah, like you always want to have an eye out for those guys, but there's not a lot of them. And then when they do hit the market, the bidding goes crazy because everyone's kind of looking for that same thing. Like I'm sure, if you look at the 24 or so teams that are still in playoff contention, probably 22 of them feel like they could use that exact player. Like, a lot of teams aren't happy with their defense cores. A lot of teams are shallow or playing guys higher in the lineup than they should be. I mean, you mentioned Pedersen. Like I seen people in Pittsburgh writing about how he's playing way too high in the lineup. They have him on their top pairing, and they're like, he should be a third pairing guy. Like that's the thing is like, say someone like that becomes available and you stretch and you you pay, an exorbitant amount for him. It's like, okay, well, what if he comes in and he's only a third pairing guy and he's a marginal upgrade over Derek Forbort and you just gave up, a second round pick for him? Like it's tough. It's tough to try to find like that exact right player who does what we're talking about.
Yeah, I just think they got to negate any of these freebie goals in the net mount. Like if you're in opposition, I just think sometimes the Bruins, like it's too easy for the forwards. Like there's got to be something a little bit more, and sometimes it's lack of coverage, other times it's outmuscled, and you just can't have it in the playoffs. So
yeah, and some that has to be internal. Like now, Mason Lohrei had a tough game Thursday, and even wound up getting sat down for a part of it. I think he only played like 8.5 minutes. Mason Lohrei had been playing well before then. We had talked, I think, on our last episode about him, pushing to stay in the top 4. And I still think that's in play. Like one bad game doesn't ruin that. But Mason Lohrei does have to get tougher. Like does have to win more of these battles. And it's like, okay, so am I necessarily looking for an upgrade over Mason Lohrei, or am I trying to work with Mason Lohrei to get him to that point where he is using his size more and winning more of those battles and getting more physical? And it's like that doesn't happen overnight, and that's going to be tough to judge because, like, can you get there by the playoffs? Get Mason Lohrei to where he needs to be, or is Mason Lohrei probably not going to get there until next season? Like that's going to be a tough to call that the Bruins are going to have to try to figure out here over the next, month or two.
Yeah, Grizzlick's the interesting one. He's the one that I'm curious to see what happens with him because he has value. He's obviously an NHL caliber defenseman. You have the emergence of Lohrei. Grizzlick's also been playing decent with Shattenkirk, but what do you do if Forbort comes back? Like, that's going to be an interesting one to follow. Obviously, we've mentioned on this podcast, you can never have too much depth on defense for sure, especially NHL caliber defensemen. So maybe nothing happens and they just have, those guys on the depth chart.
Yeah, my ideal, taking a trade out of it, because obviously that's always a possibility, but keeping things internally, like, to me, the ideal way that this plays out is Lohrei keeps getting better, does run with a top 4 spot and claim that as his, and then you're left with your top 4, however you want to line up, is set. McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, Lohrei. And then you have a third pairing rotation, however you want to play it out, of Grzelcyk, Shattenkirk, Forbort. And, if you're facing a heavier team, Forbort's in, Grzelcyk's out. If you're playing a game where you think you need more transition, Grzelcyk's in, maybe Forbort sits, maybe you try Grzelcyk on the right side. Like, then you can figure out your third pairing and move pieces around there. Maybe Parker Wotherspoon even stays in the conversation somewhere. But getting that top 4 set is the most important thing. And I guess, to echo like what I just said, like what the Bruins have to decide is whether they have that internally, and specifically meaning Mason Lohrei sticking in that kind of role, or if it's not quite his time yet and they have to find an upgrade.
Would you be surprised if they sent him back down again? Like, do you guys think he's kind of sticking around the rest of the season at this point, or are you thinking we're kind of just waiting for Forbort to come back and then he's back down?
No, I think he's sticking around for now.
Well, yeah, for now.
Yeah, so I guess like I would say that's up to Mason Lohrei. If he plays like he had been in, I'm gonna say like the last couple of weeks, and keeps building on that, he's gonna stick around. He's not gonna be the one to, Parker Wotherspoon will get sent down, not him. But if he has more games like Thursday night, where he was a -3 and had a turnover leading up to 1 goal, combined with Grzelcyk to lose Jeff Carter in front of the net on another, and just an all-around rough game. Like, if there's more of those, then it becomes a conversation. But right now, like I think there's been more good than bad over more good than bad over the last month.
Yeah, but if Grzelcyk keeps matching him poor performance for poor performance, and then it's like, I mean, until Grzelcyk turns back into the Matt Grzelcyk of 2018 to 2022, whatever. It's like he needs to also elevate his game to force the Bruins to send Lori down, and he has to elevate it for a period of time. That's the other part too. It's the combination of Grzelcyk is playing not to his standards, and Lori is for the most part getting better each game, setback, getting better and better, setback. So as long as that's the combination, I don't see how they send him down at all. If Lori struggles for a while and Grzelcyk steps up, maybe. But even then, it's like I don't know if there's a benefit to that either. Keep them all around.
Do you want to get to a few quick things before we sign off here? So I'll just keep this real quick. It wasn't Swayman's best game. He gave up a lot of rebounds. That also, sometimes the great goaltending the Bruins have been getting helps cover up for some of those defensive mistakes, failed clears, whatever it may be. And maybe we're not talking about the defense for this long if Swayman holds on to a few of those and just ends plays. But, he's had such a great season. He had a down game on Thursday. Coach said he was considering taking him out, but he wanted to let him fight through it. So that's why, even though he gave up 5 goals, he stayed in the net. And obviously we know what happened after that. He didn't give up any after the 5th goal. Bruins came back. Well, I shouldn't say that. He allowed the Bruins to get back in the game, tie at 5-5, and then gave up that power play goal to Crosby to make it 6-5. And that's what the final score was. So he didn't have his best game, but it seemed uncharacteristic. We didn't get a chance to talk to him after the game either, which usually we do. We get to talk to the starting goalie after the game. But anyway, I just, maybe that's an anomaly because we think that he's had a great season. And then also to the All-Star game stuff, if you guys want to touch on that a little bit. Pastrnak, who's been having another great season, is into the All-Star game. So
yeah, and last night aside, I think Swayman's going to end up as an All-Star too. So there's the NHL announced the 1 representative from each team, so the first 32, and there's 12 more spots league-wide that go to a fan vote. And I think 4 goalies have to be selected from that group. So I would be surprised if Swayman's not one of them, honestly, unless he really falls apart over the next couple of weeks. But that would be a nice little nod for him. First All-Star. Yeah, Pastrnak, 4th All-Star appearance, no surprise. If we had more time here, I would go on my rant about how stupid it is that every team needs to get an All-Star because not every team has an All-Star on their roster. But I'll save that one.
Yeah, I mean, I saw. I think Ty Anderson tweeted out an image of a hat being sold at the pro shop at the Garden. Maybe it was like a 1996 All-Star game. If you ever want to see just how far the NHL All-Star games have regressed, go on YouTube and watch the 1996 skills competition and All-Star game and look at the names on each blue line representing. It may have been, if it wasn't the Eastern Conference versus the Western Conference, it was North America versus the world at the time, but I think it was East versus West. The names that each team boasts it's cross-generational and it's insane. You have you have Gretzky playing with Korea and Sakic and Eisner. It's insane. It's insane. And the game was a phenomenal game too. But nowadays it's to Scott's point, it's all right, so who's Columbus's All-Star? The Water Boy, okay, and then it's just not great. It's not great, but yeah, kudos to Pasta. Obviously,
we'll get to that rant closer to the All-Star game, and also we've had this rant previous seasons, All-Star games. Yeah, absolutely.
I will say I'm at least glad that they're bringing back the player draft. They announced that Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews will be the 2 captains picking their teams, so. I at least like that. It's at least something a little extra interesting, different.
And I'm sure Toronto will make it a good time because it's such a mecca of hockey. They'll optimize the weekend. I feel like with media and stuff.
Yeah, and then the last thing that we didn't get a chance to touch on was first Boston PWHL game was Tuesday. No, what day was it? Wednesday. I don't
That
know.
was Wednesday.
It was
Wednesday the
Wednesday.
3rd.
I broadcast the game. My brain was so just focused on that I don't even know what day it is now. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still tired. But it was a great game, and I think that people are gonna interest was really high on game one, and I feel like the momentum is there for it to continue to be high. Turnout was better than expected, ratings were better than expected. And the product was just great. Like, I will say, like, as the analyst in that game, I realized I need to get to the point quicker than I do in college hockey, men's or women's, because plays just happen faster. Like, this is pro level speed. It's faster than I think both men's and women's college hockey. And next thing you know, I'm talking about something. Next thing you know, there's a centering pass, the puck's on net, and it's like everything happened quick. I don't know if you got a chance to watch the game, Brian. I think you did. I know Scott was there. Some of those goals, all 3 Minnesota goals went bar down at like the fastest pace you could possibly shoot the puck. And I was just like, I didn't even see the Heisey one go in. Like, it happened so fast. It was just like, oh, it's in the net. All right. So I think it's been, I would say it's probably further along than they were expecting, considering they only had 125 days from the founding of the league to the first game of the league to get everything underway and to kind of like market it. And it's been a success so far.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of elements to this. First of all, you did a phenomenal job on the game, and looking forward to the first play-by-play game that you do as well. You were on color for the first game, so maybe to your point, maybe you can watch back the first game and do the play-by-play just to get used to the speed, because I'm sure it is a little bit quicker than what you're used to.
It was quick.
But I've also, growing up, I went to a lot of, I live just on 10 minutes on the highway from Songus, and went to a lot of like Lock Monster games. And, I think between Manchester with the Verizon Center, which used to have the Monarchs, I think that building is no longer even useful to any hockey team. Maybe SNU, but I think they may play in Hooksett. Anyway, you had the Verizon Center in Manchester with the Monarchs. You had the Songus with the Lock Monsters. And then, in the last like 7 to 8 years, I'd say like both those arenas just kind of lost their tenants, except for Riverhawks hockey. And so I think it's, in addition to the PWHL's inaugural season, just what that means to sports in general. It's also great for like the city of Lowell to get another professional hockey team back in that arena to share with the Riverhawks, and that's really cool too for local residents. So I definitely didn't get a chance to go to the first one, but I'm going to for sure go to some games there.
Yeah, it was a really good atmosphere, and it was a little bit of a bummer because like player introductions, great reception. Bergeron comes out to do the ceremonial puck drop with his oldest 3 kids. That was cool. And then Minnesota scores 2 goals in the first 8 minutes, and it kind of quiets everyone down. You get, you finally get Boston's first goal, and people going crazy, and then Minnesota scores less than a minute later. So it was like there was, until near the end, there wasn't really room for like the crowd to really get into it. But then they cut it to 3-2 with a little under 3 minutes to go, and the crowd was really loud, like from that point on to the finish line. And it was cool to like see game one, them sort of getting embraced as like a true home team that these fans are cheering for, and not just like this curiosity of, hey, let me see what this new league's about. Like, you could tell there's actually like a connection there between fans and team. That's, you're right. Like, Songs is a great venue. I am curious to see like if it sticks beyond this season as their home, because look, obviously, it says Boston on their jersey, and they want to be a Boston team. Fans in and around Boston, especially fans south of Boston, getting up to Lowell on a weeknight is tough. Like, I've done that coming home from the office at 5:00, heading home. Like, it's not a fun commute. So, but Brian, to your point, like the flip side of that is, if you market to Lowell and like the towns around here, there's definitely a fan base. I'm from Dorica, so I'm with you. Like, went to Lock Monsters games growing up, Lowell Spinners, and they always had good crowds. Like, those teams were embraced by this area, and the Lock Monsters weren't a Bruins affiliate. Like, that they were always other teams. So it was like they got embraced, not just because of any sort of connection to the Bruins, because there was none. They got embraced because they were Lowell. So really fascinating to see like how it grows going forward. But the product on the ice is great. Like, for the first time and really forever, like, you do have all the best women's players in the world under one umbrella. I mean, the Boston team has like at least a handful of Olympians. I think 4 Patty Kazmaier Award
My God,
winners.
they have more than a handful of Olympians.
Yeah, like it's truly just like a loaded roster.
Well, the whole league is, because it's only 6 teams. So like even after watching some really great women's college hockey and some players that you would have thought would have made the team, like, they're not even making the cut because that's how stacked these 6 teams all are. Like, I honestly am interested to see how it shakes out. We're only a few games into the season. I don't know which team's better than the other yet because they're all stacked. Like, they all have great goalies. They all have incredibly solid first lines. So it's going to be interesting. And they already sold out of a bunch of their merch. And like I said, I think maybe they're further along than they thought they were going to be. The first season, it was like the women wanted to get underway. They wanted to play. It's a shortened season. Next year there will be more games than there is this year. And they found a good venue for this year. And a lot of things are still a work in progress. Like we mentioned, they don't have names on the jerseys. Like on the front of the jerseys, there's no mascot. It's just Boston as of right now. And it's all going to come together as time goes on. But I would say maybe it's at like where they thought they'd be year 3 and year 1. And that's great.
Yeah. I mean, I think something else that's really cool too is like, because we're living it in the present, I don't even think we grasp just how cool it is that this is the inaugural season, right? Like, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, like people will be talking about the PWHL original 6, Minnesota, Boston, New York, Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, back when they didn't even have names or mascots. Like, that is pretty cool.
Yeah. And Bridget, because she did the first broadcast.
Exactly,
It's kind of weird to think that Billie Jean King knows who I am.
Well,
and I'm just like, what is going on right now?
It's pretty cool.
It is. It's awesome.
Yeah. One other thought on I mean, as far as staying in Lowell goes, I think it's the best rink in the greater Boston area, outside of obviously the TD Garden. I mean, Agganis is great. I think maybe if they could do Agganis, if they could, I don't know if they could do that. You have Matthews Arena.
I don't want Harvard.
I think Harvard might be too small for what they want.
I mean, Agganis would be the only appropriate size attendance rink in Boston, but you have to share the ice. And I don't know if they can do that. So it might, by default, I don't think they have a choice. It might be Lowell, and as you said, it's a great option for people north of Boston, at least.
Yeah, it does seem like Agganis would probably be the target. Like Connie Forum's too busy. You have BC men's and women's hockey there, BC men's and women's basketball. Like, I don't think they'd be able to really plan around that. Agganis, it really is just BU men's hockey. Like, women's team doesn't play there. The basketball teams don't play there. There are a lot of other events. So I wondered about Agganis from the start, and I still wonder about that going forward. But you're right. Like, outside of that,
makes the most sense.
If they're, I mean, they started, game 1, they had 4,000, just over 4,000 fans there. Obviously, it'll probably fluctuate a little bit for a while, but longer term, like, the goal is to go up from there. And so, yeah, that does limit like how many venues can accommodate that crowd. So
yeah, when you look at what the attendance was in Ottawa, it was sold out and it was over 8,000 people. So, maybe if that's, and you want to know what I have been thinking of, like, in comparison is, and this is because of Billie Jean King, but Sorry, Melvin. She started women's tennis. Like they all signed $1 contracts back in the 70s to start up their own, players association and everything. And think about where women's tennis is right now. Women's tennis sells out huge stadiums around the world. Sorry, Melvin has
Melvin just went hard on the forecheck.
Just a quick note. Agganis is 7,200 capacity and Songus is 64, which is surprising. I thought they were pretty close, but I didn't realize Agganis had that many more seats. Not that it's that much more; it's less than 1,000. But one other note I would mention before we sign off is for those listening, it's going to be probably happening as you listen to this podcast, or it would have already taken place. But is USA Sweden World Junior Gold medal game is at 1:30 on the 5th. Right now it's noon, so we'll have a chance to check that out afterwards. But that's another thing to watch and keep an eye on, and another notch in the belt for Team USA. If they can capture that, it'd be, maybe like their 5th or 6th gold medal in the last dozen years or so.
Yeah, and all the BC guys on that team, plus Lane Hudson from BU. Gotta mention him as well.
And there it is.
BU is the only college guaranteed to win a gold medal because they also have Tom Willander on Sweden. So
there you go.
He's been waiting to say that this entire episode.
Mm-hmm.
Been waiting to say that.
All righty. Well, Bridget and Scott, I think we are good for this episode. If you have nothing else,
we're good.
All good.
Okay. Thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you next week. Hey guys, thanks for watching this Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.